YouTube Bozic going the Goat House is back. So this morning we heard some Trey Lance news that several teams are calling the 49ers about possibly trading for Trey Lance. The 49ers aren't calling them, but they are listening. And it sounds like Brock Purdy and other teams know that Brock Purdy will be their guy once he's healthy. They also signed Sam Darnold, keep in mind. And the 49ers could be looking for draft picks. So a trade is possible. It might happen never. It might happen. I don't think it would happen before the draft. It could happen during the draft or after the draft if it is going to happen. I got some scenarios for you guys today. We're going to talk about different teams as well, different scenarios per the top landing spot teams, and some other interesting info there. So right now, a lot of NFL draft content, still getting through position rankings, a couple more mock drafts before we're ready and live during day one of the NFL draft week from tomorrow. So hopefully you join us, like, subscribe to notifications on. Check out our sponsors, GLD Shop, Liquid IV, Walk the Mock. Make sure you follow our Twitter for instant news. Links pinned in the comments for all that. So the Texans are one of the very top landing spots, in my opinion. Some 49ers ties there, looking at the coaching staff. Really, not just D'Amico Ryans, but both sides of the ball. And they could be looking for a quarterback. A lot of rumors lately that they'll be passing on a quarterback at 2. Does the Lance news kind of go with that? Maybe that is why they're passing on a quarterback at 2, or it just could be because they don't like the quarterbacks at 2. They feel like they can wait till 12 or second round, something like that. But I got 2 Texan scenarios, so let's just start with this one. 33rd overall pick, which is very, very close to being a first-round pick. First, what would Trey Lance's value be? I mean, the 49ers traded up a whole lot to go up and get him. We still didn't really see him get that much of a chance right now. I mean, it hasn't been the best signs, mainly getting injured, but he definitely still has upside. And I like that he's a pass-first guy that can avoid pressure and can run. You do love that. I think other teams will love that about him. And again, still young, still getting better. So I was thinking most likely a day 2 pick or multiple day 2 picks or an earlier day 2 and an earlier day 3. But I guess you can't rule out a late first round because you got to think there's probably teams that would rather trade a later first round pick or around that range, 33rd overall, for a guy like Trey Lance over drafting, I guess we'll say Anthony Richardson, Will Levis, and Hendon Hooker, in the middle of the first round, or you might have to do it earlier. I think teams would rather do that. And there's going to be teams that still need quarterbacks during or after the draft. So I think there's some sort of shot. So what if the Texans take that early second-round pick? Remember, in this scenario, they already selected twice, we would think, in the first round. That early second-round pick that the 49ers would be interested in, I think they would do this deal. I think that's a possibility. Maybe this next scenario is a little more likely, or it could be something in the middle, perhaps. The Texans do have 2 third-round picks, so pretty early picks, 65 and 73. So maybe team. You do have to factor in that Lance is coming off the injury. He's still an unknown. He's coming off the injury. You'd have to trade for him, so maybe he's not worth close to the first-round pick or in that range. So 2 third-round picks, I do think is a possibility as well. Very tough to figure out where his value is. I think my money would be on multiple day 2 picks or like equal value there. So no second round pick, but there's 2 early third round picks for the Texans. Maybe they take that defensive player at pick 2. Some seem to think it could be Tyree Wilson, but could be Will Anderson, which I would imagine most people would prefer for them. And then with that 12th pick, they could take a receiver. For their quarterback, could be Trey Lance in the second round, or could they trade up from the second round from 33 in the very late of the first round and take their quarterback there? That's a possibility as well. So a lot of Texans are maybe the most intriguing team, and it's really not just because they're technically on the clock, or not technically, but almost it's like they're on the clock right now. But yeah, very intriguing. So thought this was an option as well. Another team that I think is a legit landing spot, also in the AFC South, the Tennessee Titans. They need a quarterback right now. I think Lance would fit with them, and they bring in as their new GM Rand Carthen, who comes from the San Francisco 49ers. So there's some ties there as well. And we talked about after Purdy was kind of going off, early offseason, we were talking about could Trey Lance be available via trade. We haven't really heard anything about that. We talked about it. I was mentioning the Titans like right away. That just made sense right away. So this could be the top landing spot. So the 41st overall pick which is somewhat of an early second-round pick. Could go to the 49ers. And then you'll probably got to throw another one in there. Could a second and a third be a little rich? Maybe. Titans don't have a fourth this year, and they could rather just trade a pick next year. So a fourth round next year. Could it be a third round next year? Possibility. But we went to 41st and a fourth. And we could sit here and say, will it be worth it for the 49ers? Even though this is decent value for a guy you're going to probably have on your bench, which Purdy is healthy. But, I mean, they got a lot of stock in Trey Lance, obviously. They valued him. They got to think he's got to have upside still. Somebody might get desperate as time goes on as we get closer to the season. So the Niners may just say it's not worth it, rather keep him more, and we might hold out and see if his value goes up. Keep in mind that as a possibility as well. So Titans, legit landing spot. Them versus the Texans. I guess right now, it's tough. Maybe you would say the Titans are more likely right now because the Texans do have 2 first-round picks, and they could trade up with that 33rd or take somebody with a quarterback with a 33rd. So they could still take that quarterback, and some people holding out hope that they could take one. The guy they want at 2, perhaps. I would take C.J. Stroud if it was me at 2, if Bryce Young is gone at 1, of course. So, if we get through the first round and the Texans don't have a quarterback yet and we're going into day 2, I think maybe the Texans are a little more likely. But a team that has actually been mentioned and we thought might be a landing spot as well, but actually is mentioned to be a team that is called the 49ers is the Minnesota Vikings. And we'll have a couple scenarios here for the Vikings. But, they're looking for their quarterback of the future. A guy for Kevin O'Connell to pick, perhaps a guy that's a little cheaper so they can build around, or mainly the defense, because the defense was the issue last year. Maybe that it would help them a little bit more if it's a rookie contract. They didn't extend Cousins. They didn't restructure, or they did restructure to clear some money, but they didn't really do anything that says, yes, he'll be the quarterback next year. He's going to be a free agent. Seems that way. So that's why they're a landing spot, but it also came out that they talked to the 49ers around the combine about a potential deal. And that's very interesting for multiple reasons, because there was rumors that Kirk Cousins and the Niners talks happened during the combine. So were they related? Were they related? And we'll talk about Cousins in a second here, another scenario. Were they is that why the Vikings were talking Trey Lance? Because they were already talking Cousins, or vice versa, So what's the situation there? Do the 49ers feel like they can afford Cousins? I think Shanahan would like Cousins, but it also sounds like Purdy's their guy, and they have Darnold to back him up. So very interesting. So the Vikings don't have a second-round pick, so the 87th overall would be a third round this year. And, of course, another pick would have to be involved. And since they're not really giving up a big-time value pick this year, third round, 87th pick, it's pretty decent. Can get a good player there. Another third-round pick for the Niners, though. Then maybe they would have to give up a next-year second. Keep in mind, you would think the Vikings probably, in the back half of the first round, somewhere in that range, could be, or in any round, I should say, could be in the middle, but you'd think later than that. So that second round pick wouldn't be super early if it was. That'd be a gamble for the Vikings. It'd be kind of giving up a lot, perhaps giving up a lot here. So I thought that was an interesting scenario where the Vikings, we know, have kind of shown some interest. But another thing that's interesting is why didn't it happen? Why didn't it go anywhere? Was it because the 49ers just don't want to trade him? The two sides, what mainly happens when trades don't happen, the two sides just do not agree on compensation. Very possible. Or, could Cousins have been involved? It was only if Cousins was going to get traded. That was complicated because the 49ers don't have a first or second round pick. Or the interesting one, possibility, not saying this is it, but possibility, are the Vikings, still interested in Lance but don't want to pull the trigger yet, because they want to wait and see what happens next week during the draft. They've been linked to Will Levis a lot, but don't have a second-round pick. Do they trade up? Maybe if Levis starts to slide, maybe they just, just in case, let's stay put around that range where they're picking 23, see if a guy like that drops through, because now it sounds like the quarterbacks might get pushed back, might slide a little bit. Don't think they would slide. A guy like Levis, don't think he would slide that far, but Vikings, you never know. The draft is mystery. Let's see what happens first. If they don't get that guy, then they trade for Lance. So I do think that's a possibility. Not that they're for sure looking for a quarterback in the draft, but I think that's a possibility as well. So now they become a very, very intriguing team there. But let's throw the Kirk Cousins scenario in there. I don't think it's going to happen because it's a little tricky with the picks, but mainly, do the 49ers just roll with Brock Purdy? Do they want to pay a quarterback a lot? Shanahan's been linked to the Cousins a lot in the past. you'd like to think, maybe the 49ers would have won the Super Bowl. Cousins at the same time, people view him like good quarterback, can't win a Super Bowl. But if he's on the 49ers those last couple of times they were making a run, a healthy, durable Kirk Cousins, pretty talented, could they have won? So maybe. So they could still be interested. But so they swapped the quarterbacks, and the 49ers don't pick until the third round. So 99 and 101 going to the Vikings. That is still a little tricky because it doesn't seem like, for a proven quarterback like Cousins, where him on the Niners, they would be better than what the Vikings were, and the Vikings had some decent teams. You feel like it would have to be more. They don't have a first, second, could be a future pick, but then you factor in that, big salary and an expiring deal, so you'd have to give him an extension. So maybe the 2/3 would be enough with Trey Lance, perhaps. I just don't expect this to happen, but it is interesting to think about. And then those talks at we heard Cousins was talked about, Vikings 49ers at the Combine. Now all of a sudden we're hearing about Lance was talked about, Vikings 49ers at the Combine. Were they together or apart? So it is a little interesting. And we kind of have another Viking scenario here, and we'll talk about some other teams as well. But an interesting scenario, it involves more than just the Vikings. Again, next slide, we will talk about other teams, but team picking late first round. And I talked about this on Twitter a little bit, and we'll talk about these teams, but Ravens, Bucks, teams like that. Could they trade back? Gain extra picks, and then, if the 49ers are demanding that earlier pick, do they use that pick they traded back to send over to 49ers for Trey Lance, or do they use some or all of the picks gained, or package that with some picks you have in the mid-rounds or day 2 to trade for Lance? Therefore, you kind of still gain picks because teams like the Vikings and the Ravens and the Bucks, who are kind of rebuild, they're looking to gain picks, actually. Don't be surprised if some or maybe all of 3 of those teams that I mentioned trade back on day 1 of draft day because they're looking to gain picks. So if you're going to trade for a guy, trade picks away, it's a little tough. So you trade back. You get more of the appropriate value for Lance while gaining picks and trading that for Lance. A lot has to happen, but it actually makes a lot of sense to me. So the scenario, we'll use the Vikings and the Chiefs pick at 31. I think the Chiefs actually it's a possibility that trade could actually happen, whether it's for Lance or not, eventually for Lance or not. Obviously not involved with those 2 teams, but I can see the Vikings moving back. They don't have a second-round pick. They're looking for more picks. Not that they would gain a second there, and the Chiefs could come up and get that, starting right tackle or the receiver, whoever it may be, the defensive end, that they need to get. They don't want to wait to the very end of the first round. So the Vikings move back to 31 and they gain around 3 and 4 picks from the Chiefs. We'll use in this scenario. It could be other teams. Do the Bills, the Bengals, and there would be less of value, but do they want to move up? Teams like that. And they could trade 31 for Lance then. It's not like it's 23. It's where they originally were. It's 31. It's likely too rich still. Could it still be involved? And could they get a pick back, like in the middle rounds, 3rd, 4th, 5th, whatever it may be? Or could you package some thirds? Because now you have 2/3, your own and the one you gained from the Chiefs, together, or a mixture, the 3rd and the 4th, a mixture of future picks, whatever it may be, to make this deal get done easier. And then also gain picks. Other than that, like, a lot of things need to happen. Like, something else needs to happen first, then this needs to happen. But I think you could agree it kind of makes some sense there. It kind of makes sense. That's very interesting, too. If it's like a during the draft, it's kind of getting set up on day 1, happens on day 2. Be pretty fun, pretty cool. But Colts are a legit landing spot. We talked about the Texans and the Titans make the most sense. Legit top landing spots. And the Vikings have been mentioned. They also might need a quarterback of the future. There's also their quarterback's also been linked to 49ers, so that's another legit landing spot perhaps. But the Colts are also in that conversation if they don't land a quarterback in the draft next Thursday. They're picking 4th, or maybe they move up a spot or 2, whatever it is. I would think they land a quarterback, especially with the news that some of them might slip a little bit. There might only be one going in the top 3 unless somebody trades up. I would think the Colts land a quarterback. You would think. So then that would take them out of the Trey Lance sweepstakes. But if they, for some reason, don't land a quarterback, they are very much in. And it's a good fit in Steichen's offense. And they are very much in, like more than in. Like that might be the team. And it's weird, very weird, that it's all 3 out of 4 AFC South teams that would be in then, because we already talked about Texans and Titans. The Texans we talked about the Texans already, but they may rather have Lance over a rookie. I mean, especially with the news that they might be passing. They're probably, based on the news, probably are passing a guy at 2, even though Rappaport thinks that they're going to take one at 2 still. That's a possibility, I suppose. Maybe they would rather have Lance over a rookie, or they can take one at 2 still. They can take one at 12. They can trade up from 12. They can take one at 33. They can trade up from 33. They can trade for Lance, so the Texans are very interesting. But other landing spots, the Bucs make some sense. Later round 1 pick, could they move around a bit, gain some picks? And like I talked about that Vikings scenario, the Ravens, they could reach a deal with Lamar and then have no interest in Lance, or they can just say, Lamar's probably 1 year with us, and then he might do this all again next year. And they kind of need a quarterback because of durability issues anyways, so they could go for Lance. Another team that could trade back perhaps. The Raiders could be looking for a quarterback. I think they would be more likely, if they're going to add one, they would probably draft one over trading for Lance. My opinion there. Lions, looking for a backup for Goff now and then kind of take over next year, perhaps. A little bit more of a wild card. The Commanders sound like they're good with Sam Howell in their situation, but could view Lance as more of a fit. Could look to make a move. The Dolphins, Mike McDaniel's there, so the 49ers connection, and they could use a quarterback to back up Tua and kind of take over in the future. That could make some sense, but they're just and they do have some backups, and they are so set, it feels like, with Tua, so more of a wild card. And I put Atlanta with a question mark there because I do love the fit in Arthur Smith's scheme, and they've been doing homework on quarterbacks, but they're also kind of saying Ritter's their guy. Maybe it's smoke, but I do kind of feel like that they're going to ride it out with Ritter here and Heineke as their backup, and they're trying to build the best roster around the quarterback, and then ride with that guy. Ritter would be the guy, so it makes sense as a fit. It can't 100% rule it out, but I'd say most likely not there. So, of the top landing spots, again, Texans, Titans, Vikings, and then the Colts if they pass on a quarterback, and then the next tier would be, I'd say, Bucs and Ravens, and the next tier would probably be Raiders, Lions, and then the next tier maybe Commanders, and then the next tier probably the Dolphins, and then the very bottom the Falcons. So I'd kind of split that up into several tiers there, if you get what I'm saying. So it is very interesting. It's not like this big-time quarterback, but it's huge news, and it's interesting news because he could be a big-time quarterback. He could be. We don't know. It's a gamble, but you see the upside. You like the arm strength. You like the athleticism. He's a little too crazy with the ball sometimes, too much velocity on the ball. The accuracy could be a little bit better about that. Just kind of relax him, calming him down a little bit. Maybe tweaking the mechanics. Still essentially a prospect. If you view Justin Fields as a guy from the same draft class as a guy with tremendous upside, which he does have upside, then I think you should view a guy like Lance. If he's healthy, he has some good upside too. So, again, so that's kind of a point to anybody that thinks I think 99% of people think he still has upside. That doesn't really have anything to do with if you think he's good or going to be good or not. That's different. He still has the upside. Teams will see that. They'll like his traits, his tools, so they could take a shot, maybe a bigger, better pick or picks than you think because of that. And again, factor in that if you were to take a guy like Richardson who's raw, could work on the accuracy a little bit, another guy that runs a bit, you'd have to take him, and you'd think the latest he goes is the 11th pick to the Tennessee Titans. My opinion, I suppose. You'd have to take use a pick on him up there. Where Lance, not far off, like similar boat. Maybe Richardson has more upside. Maybe he has a floor that's way lower though, perhaps. But Lance, you have to trade way less. You have to use a draft pick or picks of way less than that top 11 pick. So to be an example there. Or even like the Vikings. 23rd overall, you take Hooker, or would you rather trade less than the 23rd overall pick? Maybe it's multiple picks, but less than the 23rd overall pick for a guy like Lance. You probably rather go for Lance, right? So that's kind of where my head's at, where maybe the value is a little bit more because you use those other quarterbacks is kind of an example there. So interesting stuff. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you think I missed a team, or give me your scenarios. We're always talking with you guys on Twitter. Let me know what your favorite scenario from this video was as well. But yeah, that's going to wrap it up. We have full NFL draft coverage. We have recent prospect rankings by position. We're going to have more of those. We're going to have my big board, my guys, more mock drafts. There's a lot to get to still, and there isn't a ton of time, but we're going to get to it. We always get it done, and it will be live during day one of the NFL draft. Make sure you like, subscribe, turn notifications on. Very important. Also very important to follow our Twitter. Links pinned in the comments for anything you're looking for. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.